Okay, Steph, want to get started?
Go ahead.
Okay. Welcome everybody to our webinar for the Tri-City Chamber of Commerce, bringing you Rise Advisors, our good partners out there in Coquitlam. Thanks for coming on. I know these are really interesting and challenging times we're all going through right now. Nobody's been through them before, but I just want to let you know that the Chamber is here for you. We are not going anywhere. We are getting information out as quick as we can. We're here to support you. We have your back and we're here to work for you. If you have questions in any way, shape, or form, please call us. We will answer them as quick as humanly possible. If there's information you want on something that you can't find, let us know. If you haven't signed up for our email list to get the daily emails that are coming out, please do so. It's not just members only. It's open to anybody in the business community. The virus knows no boundaries, nor do we right now. We're just trying to help out businesses as much as we can. So thank you everybody for being here. As I said, we're really pleased to have Rise Advisors here with us today. Great partners of the Chamber and been in the community for a number of years. Just changed their name recently. But we've got Adam, Hussein, and Brant here to talk about some of the government relief measures, changing hourly. Just so you know, we'll be doing a webcast probably next week. I just got off the phone with Service Canada and CRA to talk about some of these changes. But they're going to touch on those. We're going to talk about cash conservation and business continuity during these tough times. So it's some great information coming forward. You don't need to hear from me anymore. In case you don't know, I'm the CEO of the Chamber, Mike Hine, for those of you who are new. I'm going to turn it over to, I think, Hussein starting first, aren't you? I'm going to turn over to Rise Advisors, and we'll come back at the end with Q&A. So enjoy the webinar, and let's get going.
Thanks, Mike. First and foremost, thank you all for joining us today. These are certainly unprecedented times, and business owners have been forced to make some tough decisions, not only to ensure the continuity of their business, but to protect their employees and their customers. We ourselves are still getting used to this remote working environment. We know that many of you have been required to transition your business into either remote working conditions, reduced working hours, amongst other changes. Our goal today is to not only provide some clarity on the federal and provincial benefit programs that have been announced, but also to clarify, as business owners, what you should be considering today and in the next few months to better set yourself up for success once this pandemic comes to a close. Our agenda for today will be as follows. Some general considerations that business owners should be making today with respect to their cash flow and business continuity, a brief summary of the benefits that have been released and how best to apply for them, an overview of the tax relief measures provided by the Canada Revenue Agency and the provincial government. We'll walk through a timeline, both from a benefit and cash flow perspective, integrating many of these programs that we will discuss and some long run planning through the summer. And then lastly, we'll run into Q&A and hopefully address some of the concerns that all of you have at this time. So from an introduction perspective, my name is Hussein Haji. I'm a partner with Rise. We're a full service accounting, assurance and advisory firm focusing on business owner compliance and planning based right here in the Tri-Cities, and a long-term partner of the Chamber. Joining me, we have Adam Plank, our lead tax partner, and Brant Friesen, our director for performance management. To kick things off, Canada is experiencing circumstances never seen before. The economic climate itself has led many business owners to make some difficult decisions in a very short time frame, many of whom were not prepared to make such decisions. The federal government, through its stimulus package, is providing benefits that have never before seen in this country. Over the past few weeks, amounts promised have increased from the initial $82 billion package announced now to over $100 billion to help Canadians through this time. Whether it be by way of the emergency response benefit, which opened up earlier this week, or the emergency wage subsidy, which will be launched in the coming weeks, the federal government is offering incentives to not only ensure that all Canadians are supported during this time, but that jobs are protected as best as possible given the circumstances, and that businesses can manage some of the major expenses that they're going to be faced with over the coming months. As business owners yourselves, there are a number of questions that you must be asking yourself, which is likely why you're here today, including what can I apply for, what am I eligible for, what should I be doing for the betterment and sustainability of my business. Many of the measures that have been put in place by the federal, provincial governments and some of the financial institutions are aimed at really retaining and preserving cash flow for businesses right now. As owners, we were already facing tough labor markets with which was making it difficult to attract and retain staff, facing rising business costs that required us to be diligent in our management of cash flow. But this global pandemic and the effect of it leaves us with decisions to make now with a 2 to 3 month runway, where previously these decisions needed to be made over several years. On average, small businesses prior to the crises were said to have had cash reserves ranging from 30 to 60 days. We've heard business owners speaking out in our communities concerned about the long run viability of their business. The current conditions demonstrate that the situation we're faced in today presents a significant liquidity issue. The support measures that have been put in place are aimed at injecting and retaining much needed cash reserves in your businesses. And at this time, owners should be focusing on everything they can to retain the working capital until economic conditions can begin to return to some normalcy. As business owners have a variety of expenses, some of the larger ones tend to be payroll or employment related, commercial rent and or mortgage and debt payments, and related business taxes. Many of the supports that are offered are aimed at managing these expenses. So when we think about wages, for example, for those that are still open, remained open, are continuing to run your businesses, payroll supports either through the 10% wage subsidy that was previously announced or the 75% Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which will be coming out, is really aimed at preserving cash flow from a payroll perspective. Many business owners have asked, should I retain staff members and leverage the subsidy that's offered? Or should we begin layoffs and allow employees to obtain the emergency relief benefit? When you think about it from a business owner perspective, if you pause the cash flow considerations alone, think about the long-term implications of laying off key members of your team and what the likelihood is that they will return after this economic climate returns to normal, and they won't be hired elsewhere given the current economic conditions. If they're integral to your business, perhaps leveraging the wage subsidies either through the 10% or the 75%, and keeping them on staff might be the better decision for the long-term viability of your business, irrespective of cash flow considerations right now. From a rent and debt perspective, banks and financial institutions have offered reduction in debt burdens through deferral of debt payments, whether it be reduction of principal payments on commercial mortgages and term loans, capital lease payment waivers, amongst other measures. Banks are working cooperatively with their clients right now to reduce some of this overhead. So if you haven't had a chance to speak with your commercial banker, then we would suggest you do so right away. For those renting their office spaces and business locations, it's important, if you haven't already done so, to have discussions with your landlords in a very transparent manner regarding any impact to your business through this crisis, and discussing rental relief if possible and deferral to manage through. Remind your landlords that even if they themselves are concerned about cash flow from lost rent, they should be discussing with their financial institution and taking advantage of some of the cash flow reserves and programs that are in place for themselves. Lastly, if you think about it from a tax perspective, federal and provincial governments have deferred tax installment payments through the summer to allow, again, businesses to retain much needed cash flow. So as we work with our clients and with all of you, our recommendation at this time is to put yourself in a position to save as much cash flow as possible, balancing that with ensuring the long-term viability of your business, which also includes retaining your key employees. Be aware of the deferred obligations that will come due at the end of the summer. And if you're already finding yourself in a position whereby you're dipping into your cash reserves to keep your business going, speak to your advisors, your banks, and see if you're leveraged appropriately to manage through such a situation for the next 6 months. Again, many of the programs that are in place are deferrals and they're not debt forgiveness. So it's really important that business owners set aside the cash and the funds to pay these at the end of the summer when they become due. So retain the cash in case of emergency, but if possible, try not to spend it. Keep a running record of what these expenses and these deferrals are so that at the end of the summer, you can pay them if needed. While taxes and other items have been deferred, we're not really sure of what the long-term implications will be for late payments. So we recommend to all of you to be in a position to pay it if you can. I'm going to pass it now over to Brent, who's going to discuss some of the financing solutions that are available and the programs that have come out since this crisis began.
Thanks, Hussein. So the finance programs that have come out for COVID relief, you can break them up into three aspects. There's what the banks are offering on their own. There's what the BDC is offering. And then there's the BCAP programs that are co-lending programs between the BDC, EDC, and financial institutions. So the financial institutions that have stepped up at this point are the 6 chartered banks. So you've got BMO, CIBC, National Bank, the RBC, Scotiabank, and TD Bank. Some of the other banks may also be involved, but the 6 chartered banks are working very closely with the government on these financial relief programs. Hussein's already referred to the fact that your first point of contact would be the bank that you currently deal with, your business relationship manager at that bank, to look at mortgage deferrals, operating line increases, and talk to them about that. Then the next area that is little known, but the BDC has a working capital program. It's a working capital loan. It's a $2 million loan, and you have to apply for that through the BDC. It's $2 million. It's got the repayment. It's a 36-month program. First 12 months interest only. Next 24 months interest and principal, and then 40% of that over the next 24 months, and then 60% balloon payment at the end. So that's something that's little known, but worth talking to the BDC about. One thing to keep in mind, though, is when you're dealing with your financial institution, they're going to set the rules of credit. So you have to abide by their rules of credit, whether or not they want personal guarantees or general security agreements. The BDC, with their working capital loan, will require personal guarantees and general security agreements. Then you have also the BDC, if you're an existing client with the BDC with at least $1 million of loans through them, they will talk to you about extending the repayments on those loans. Then you have the government programs under what's called the BCAP, so the Business Credit Availability Program. It's kind of the umbrella that the government programs come under. The first program that's out right now with full details is CEBA, the Canadian Emergency Business Account. So just talking about CEBA in some detail, CEBA is a $40,000 limit on the CEBA loans, and they're check my notes here. So it's a $40,000 account. It's interest free over the first year, no personal guarantees. After December 31st, 2020, interest starts to accrue. If you can pay that, it's paid out. And by December 31st, 2022, you only have to pay out 75%. The next 10% is forgiven. If it's not paid out at that point in time, it has to be paid out by the end of December 2025. The interest rate on that, when it starts accruing interest, is 5%. So there are more details on that which we can share with you after. Then we have the under the BCAP, we also have these small and medium size enterprise loan guarantee program, and that's a co-lending program between the BDC and financial institutions, the 6 chartered banks, and the EDC and financial institutions. Now that co-lending program on the BDC side, the maximum a company can get under that program is $6,250,000. On the EDC side, there's another $6,250,000. So a company could get $12,500,000 under that program. You have to keep in mind that it's a qualification program. The financial institutions, it's their business, their lending credit rules that apply. So they're the ones who decide whether what the qualifications and limits are. It's a co-lending program. It's the BDC and EDC backstop 80% of it, and the lending institution, financial institution, backstops 20% of it. So a lot of it has to be negotiated. Don't have, at this point, have details on what the terms will be or the interest rates will be. But with all of these programs, what's very important to keep in mind is that they're not limitless in terms of the total funding that's available. And financial institutions are very busy. They're being basically inundated with requests. So our advice is to pursue these and be prepared and pursue them now and see where they fit. So that's a very broad overview of the financial support measures that are available at this point.
Thanks, Brent. So the next piece that we just want to touch on briefly are the various wage subsidies that have been announced over the past couple of weeks, and we'll go through some of the details on it, but we're not going to dive too much into the weeds on all the conditions on it. So the first one, the temporary 10% emergency wage subsidy item. This was the wage subsidy that was announced towards the end of March. It was initially announced just for basically Canadian-controlled private corporations that had access to the small business limit, and for certain nonprofits and registered charities. They have come out and said they've expanded eligible employers to include sole proprietors and partnerships, to expand it out a little bit, which is fantastic. This is for remuneration that's being paid between March 18th and June 19th. The maximum amount per employee is $1,375, and the maximum amount per employer is $25,000. There's no other conditions in terms of you have to show revenue loss or business loss in order to claim this subsidy. It is a subsidy that is available for everyone as long as you meet the eligible employer. It's also a subsidy that's available pretty much immediately. What you would do in order to claim this is you would reduce the withholding tax that you would make on your next payroll remittance during the period between March 18th and June 19th. You would not send in as much as long as you meet within those thresholds. A couple of points on this is that $25,000 threshold per employer is not shared amongst related companies. So if an individual owned a couple of companies and had wages being paid in both, they are eligible to claim it in each entity. So you don't have to share that amount. The other item to note is that any wage subsidy that you do claim is considered taxable in the year that you do receive it. So come next year when you are filing your tax returns, you do have to report that as income. However, this is, again, something that can be claimed immediately. It's not money that's being paid into the company from the government. It's basically money that's not being sent to the government from the company, so you get to retain that cash immediately. The second wage subsidy that was announced just last week was the 75% Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. The government did hear back, obviously, on a lot of the uproar from the business community in terms of that the 10% was not enough and that the conditions were too limited. So the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy does apply to all taxable corporations. You're not limited in terms of how big that company is. It also applies to, again, sole proprietors, partnerships, and certain nonprofits and the registered charities. The remuneration that is covered under this program is between March 15th and June 6th. However, they did bring in more conditions in terms of you do have to show a gross revenue loss decrease in business in order to apply. So initially, they wanted to see a 30% decrease in gross revenue in March, April, and May. For this year, when you compare it to last year, they did come out this morning and announce that they are relaxing those conditions a little bit. So if you were looking at your gross revenue decrease for the month of March, they have said that that's going to be a 15% decrease and not a 30% decrease. And they've also come out and said that they will allow entities to use January and February months this year as their comparison, as opposed to the prior months or the prior years. What is unclear, however, is whether those new restrictions or new conditions are applicable to everyone. or whether they're going to limit that in terms of, hey, if the company wasn't around in 2019, we're going to allow you to use January and February, or whether all entities will be able to use January and February as a comparison month regardless. We're still waiting, obviously, for the detailed legislation to come out regarding all this stuff, but as of right now, it seems that they've relaxed those conditions a little bit to make it available for more entities. A couple other points to keep in mind is when you're looking at the gross revenue amount, they have said that they're looking at only arm's length gross revenue. So if you have intercompany charges or earning revenue from related companies, those amounts are to be ignored for the purposes of the calculation. Again, we'll have to wait to see what the actual detailed legislation says on how those revenues are backed out. Also, in looking at who and what wages are applicable for this subsidy, they have said that there will be special rules for related individuals that receive wages from the company. Again, not sure what those specific rules would be, but I'm assuming that that's going to be targeted towards owners, shareholders of the company, and potentially family members as well that earn the wage from the companies. Not sure how that is going to be looked at, but there is going to be some specific rules around that. There is no overall employer cap on the amount of funds that can be received. The only cap is that they will be limited to $847 per week per employee. So if you've got 10 employees or 100 employees or 200 employees, the way that it's being outlined right now is that there's not going to be an overall cap on the employer themselves. So, but one of the ways that this subsidy is going to apply is individuals or businesses are going to have to go online with the Canada CRA or the CRA website and to apply. If the website's going to be anything like the Canada Emergency Response Benefit website, it should be fairly straightforward to apply. The government's discussion points have said that they want this to apply easily and to allow companies to benefit from it. So our anticipation is that it's not going to be overly complicated, but we also just want to make sure that individuals are looking through their gross revenue on a month-to-month basis to actually see if they do qualify, because they have said that there's going to be penalties and consequences if somehow you have mistakenly applied and received money. Again, we'll have to wait for the actual legislation to come out to see what that actually means. Last couple points on this Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy is any amount that you do receive, again, is subject to tax in the year that you receive it. Also, any amount that you receive under the 10% emergency wage subsidy will grind to the amount that you're eligible to receive under the 75% wage subsidy. And lastly, individuals or employees that are otherwise eligible to receive the Canada Emergency Response Benefit will not be eligible to receive or the employer won't be eligible to receive the emergency wage subsidy for those individuals. Again, not sure how that's going to work in practice in terms of how you verify or confirm that. But that's one of the items that we'll be looking forward to seeing in the legislation. The last a couple points just to make on some of these benefits that are out is the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. I'm sure most people are aware that this is now available and live for individuals to go on this week to apply for. This is the $2,000 a month amount that is available for individuals that have lost work or ceased work because of COVID-19, and that they have received $5,000 of income in the year before they ceased working. Now, earlier this week, they did clarify, CRA did come out and say that $5,000 income amount is not just employment and self-employment income. They will allow non-eligible dividends to count as that $5,000 income threshold. That is different than what is actually in the detailed legislation. So that's going to have to be revised, which we're expecting hopefully that to happen this week to have some more clarity on it. But as of right now, CRA is saying that so for individuals basically that own a company and they've been receiving dividends as opposed to salaries, as long as they're receiving non-eligible dividends, then and it's more than $5,000, then they should be eligible for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit as well. The BC Emergency Benefit for workers, this is something that the BC government announced last month. This is a one-time $1,000 amount that is supposed to be paid come mid-May. The BC government hasn't announced the exact details of how the application is going to work or what the conditions are. However, we do expect the conditions to basically be the same as the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. In essence, if you qualify for the federal one, you're more likely going to be able to qualify for the BC one as well. Again, still waiting for some more details to emerge on that. Those are just some of the main benefits and supports that have been announced. There are other supports that have been come out for other programs that have been relaxed in terms of the applicability to them. So we just unfortunately don't have time to go through absolutely every single one in all the detail, but there are other ones out there. If you have specific questions or concerns on how that could apply in any specific situation, more than happy to talk with people outside of that. This next slide here just really summarizes all the deadlines that have been pushed. In essence, everything's been pushed back at least a month, with the exception of the self-employed individuals. Their tax returns are still due on June 15th. That hasn't changed, but everything else has been pushed back a month. One thing to realize is, the government is reiterating that individuals should file as soon as possible to make sure that their benefits are maintained, and the same for the companies as well. In terms of the tax payment deadlines, in essence, everything's been pushed until September 1st. Again, as Hussein pointed out, this is a deferral only and not a debt forgiveness. So come September 1st, you do have to make sure that the cash is available to meet your requirements. CRA has come out to say that interest and penalties will apply if it's not paid by September 1st. What's unclear is whether that's going to be retroactive or whether it applies as of September 1st itself. The last point just to make on here is GST returns, GST tax filings. Those amounts, they have also been deferred, but only until June 30th. So all your GST remittances that you would otherwise make in May, April, and March, those can all be pushed until June 30th. But the tax returns themselves, the GST returns, should be filed on time as well. So, so that kind of gives a broad sort of scope as to the benefits that are available. Next, Hussein's just going to start walking through the timeline and how some of this stuff can be put together.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam. So if we start to piece everything kind of back together now between what should business owners be considering from a cash flow conservation perspective, from an application to some of these benefit program perspective, from a discussion with their bank perspective, there's decisions to be made kind of over the course of the next few months. But we wanted to just visually map it out for everyone into short-term, medium-term, and long-term decisions, knowing that the long-term is really the end of the summer, given the current environment. So what you could be doing today, so whether it be your employees, should they be laid off, or you as the business owner yourself, as Adam mentioned, CERB went live this week. That's the $2,000 benefit, so that's something you can do right away. So even as the business owner yourself, as long as you had a compensation by way of a T4 or a ineligible dividend, so a T5 last year in excess of $5,000, if you're in a position with reduced revenues to conserve cash flow in the business and you're not going to be taking any payment for the time being, then you would be eligible for the CERB. That's something you can do right away. On the wage subsidy side, even if you have an intention to apply for the 75% wage subsidy, you can take advantage of the reduced 10% installment payment right away. ADP, Ceridian, some of the payroll providers came out earlier this week and said that their platform is ready to do this on your behalf should you be using a third party for your payroll. Otherwise, if you do your payroll yourself, this is something you can do right away. And if you need some guidance around that, then feel free to reach out to us after the seminar. Financing, loan deferrals, discussion with your bank, gathering documents for some of the BCAP programs. These are things that you should be jumping on right away. I believe Morneau was just speaking earlier today, if not live as we are presenting today, but I believe the emergency business account applications will go live tomorrow, if not later this week. That is the $40,000 loan for those individuals that are eligible. The platform will be through your online bank. And the only stipulation around that is the payroll minimum threshold of $50,000 with a ceiling of $1 million. So companies that have separate payrolls, again, you could apply separately for the emergency business account through those various companies, and the platform will be online. The discussion with your landlord around rental relief, the reduction of hours, these are things that should be ongoing and happening right away if they haven't already for many of you. And then BC Hydro and ICBC did come out and provide a deferral program for any premiums that need to be paid for 90 days. So these are things that can be done today. What we anticipate the next 2 weeks to look like is that emergency business account, which I believe is tomorrow, and the 75% wage subsidy application once it is passed into legislation. These are things that we are anticipating over the next few weeks, and deferring any tax and installment payments are due currently. Coming into the early part of May, we assume that from a business perspective, if you're getting your documentation and making those discussions with your bank now, that we would anticipate payment on the first wave of any additional loans or any payments in early May. So when you look at the next month, really a lot of the actual cash benefits that are going to be coming into the business might be about a month away. So we have to plan appropriately for the next month. When we think about the midterm goals, so mid-May through the end of June, that's when you're going to start to see the payments on the wage subsidies start to come to fruition. Our understanding of the process is that the platform will be available sometime in the middle to the third week of May. You'll be applying for March and April at that time, and we would anticipate, based on all the language that's come through so far, that the first payment on the subsidy will be sometime in June. That will include, mid-May. That would include an aggregate payment for March and April, with a June payment for your May payroll. At this moment in time, the program has been announced for March, April, and May. No further guidance has been provided on extending the wage subsidy, but those are kind of the cash flows that you're anticipating. So if you're going to be relying on the wage subsidy to come in from a cash flow perspective, know that it's going to be about 5 to 6 weeks before you see those funds arrive in the company itself. It'll be a lump sum payment as opposed to a reduction of your payroll remittance, which you can do right away on the 10% subsidy. So just plan accordingly that you'll need about 5 to 6 weeks if you're retaining payroll and you're going to continue on with your operation before you receive the actual funds on the subsidy side. The end of June, as Adam mentioned, this is where your GST payments will start to come through, the end of the BC Hydro deferrals, the end of the ICBC deferrals. So the end of June is when you start to see some of your expenses return to normal. So just plan accordingly based on what your expected cash flow burn rate will look like coming into July. If we look at the long range timeline, and again, long range is a fluid term these days, and so we're looking at the end of August and September. That's when you start to see the taxes start to come back. And so, as we mentioned earlier, these are deferrals, and these are not forgiveness situations. So if you're able to save the installment payments and the deferred taxes and keep them aside, it's best to be prepared, if you can be, to make lump sum payments come the end of the summer. We'll be providing additional guidance as we hear it, what that might look like and what the interest burdens might look like once the repayment is expected. But at this moment in time, I plan to start resuming your existing corporate tax payments through the end of the summer. So that's kind of what the timeline looks like. You know that some of the bigger subsidies, including particularly the wage, will not be coming in for the next 5 to 6 weeks. So plan accordingly, have the discussion with the bank, take advantage of the emergency business account if you're eligible, and best plan your cash flows through the summer. We know that the optimism, will come out, and hopefully we return back to normal. We just have to wave through this time for the next 6 months. And so with that being said, we just wanted to reiterate again, have those conversations with your professional advisors, with your bank, with everyone that's involved in some element of your business. We at Riše are here to support all of you. We have a long-standing relationship with the chamber. So at any point in time, if there's anything you'd like to discuss, we're here for all of you and for everyone in the community as best as we can be, and keep you apprised of all of the updates as they come through. So with that being said, I think we'll turn it over to Q&A.
Actually, just before we start that, I just wanted to clarify, I was reading up through on some of the finance minister's comments that came out. And just to clarify some of the amounts on the 75% wage subsidy. So he did come out to say that the comparison of using January and February months for 2020 should be available to all employers, so it's not going to be limited. But he did come out and say that it's supposed to be an average of the January and February 2020 months. So it's just not picking the month that you would use. So you can compare your March 2020 revenues to an average of your January and February revenues. And the same for April and May. You can compare those months to an average of the January and February revenues as well. They also announced that in terms of calculating the gross revenue, it looks like they're going to be allowing an individual or the entity to use either the cash that they received or their normal accounting method of the accrual. You're going to want to see a little bit more detail on what that actually means, but it looks like, because some individuals and some entities, obviously they've done the work, but the cash isn't actually going to be received until later. And there's been some discussion on that. So it looks like they may be able to allow on a cash basis, a comparison for calculating the decrease in revenue. So we'll wait for some more detail to come out on that.
Okay, great. Thanks. That was great information, great presentation. We're going to take questions now, and I see there's a couple. If you can go into the chat room, that's the best place to ask your questions. And we will be sending an email out from the chamber, Stephanie, am I correct, momentarily or shortly with some of the details? And keep in mind, the minute details, until it's passed into legislation, we won't know exactly everything, right, Adam?
That's correct.
Yeah, the politicians announce this stuff and they do it with the best of intentions and correctly, but there's still stuff that needs to be worked out through, in this case, legislation needs to be passed, and then the officials will release some of the other details for us to look at. I've been in touch with Service Canada this morning and CRA, and we're hoping to get them on in a webinar next week to talk about the details. But until they're done, they won't talk till legislation is passed. They won't talk about them. So if we go into the chat room, Anita Wilson's asking a couple questions, and she's been emailing me, so I want to get these off my plate here because I'm trying to get her answers. One, she says, am I correct to understand that for our employees who are currently laid off and collecting the CERB, we owners can or should hire them back if and when we can, and then utilize the wage subsidy if available, understanding the employer then comes off the emergency benefit?
Yes, you can only claim either the CERB or the wage subsidy on behalf of your payroll. So if you're going to be claiming the wage subsidy for an employee, they need to be on your payroll for the period that you'll be claiming. So if they're currently on CERB, they would have to be brought back onto payroll.
Okay, and I test the emergency benefit. They're moving that up pretty quickly because I got a text from my daughter saying, hey, I just got $2,000 into my account like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So the money.
Yeah, if you're set up for direct deposit, the goal was for you to have your money within 3 days. Yeah, no, so she just text me, I just got $2,000, and she applied a little while ago for EI, and they just converted her over. So it's good. And Anita also asked, in the wage subsidy scenario where the business owner is self-employed, individual is not sure if they will qualify to pay itself as an employee through dividends, can or should we apply for the CERB now, or can we switch to the wage subsidy later? Very good question. So from the wage subsidy side of things, that would only at this moment in time, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but apply to payroll, so traditional payroll. So if historically you've paid yourself through ineligible dividends, they have come out and said that you're eligible for the CERB benefit. But in terms of the business owner themselves, they would need to be on payroll. And as Adam had mentioned, there will be some prescriptive language around the eligibility of the business owner themselves on the wage subsidy. So whether it's a maximum amount or the administration of it. But Adam, is there anything else you'd like to add on that?
No, that pretty much is it. We can't answer that question fully because until we see the actual legislation. So.
Yep, and hopefully soon we'll get that. So I'm looking here from other ones, and Chris is asking about can gross revenue decrease be shared amongst associated corporations? If one corporation is basically unaffected, but the other associated corporation is affected.
Yeah, so what they've come out and said is when they're calculating the gross revenue that any intercompany amounts are going to be excluded. But I don't know if they're going to say, hey, you know what, if one company has reduced it by 20%, the other company has reduced it by 15%, does that count? I don't believe that that's going to be the case. I think they are going to look at it on an entity by entity basis. However, it does seem that they are loosening up the terminology and how to calculate that reduction in terms of looking at an average of January and February for the current year, and potentially looking at cash receipts as well. So it looks like you're going to be able to pick and choose which one, and if you meet one of the reductions tests, then you'll be able to claim it.
Okay, yeah, because I've gotten that question from a couple other people too about having a couple different businesses all under the same umbrella. I've got another one here. Seasonal companies who have laid off right now and generally would again in the fall. Will this affect the employees' ability to apply for EI again in the fall? Or is it better for employees in this situation to apply for the CERB right now rather than EI?
Good question. Yeah, so what they've come out and said is that all individuals that have been laid off should apply for the CERB. And during the course of the 16 weeks while you collect the CERB payment, those won't count against the EI weeks that you're eligible for. So all individuals that are currently unemployed and cannot physically work as a result of the circumstances or find work should be applying for the CERB, and your CERB payments will not apply against your EI weeks.
Okay. Robin Davidson's asking, does it look likely that a corporation owners can get the 75% wage subsidy for their own payroll?
That we don't know, right? So they have come out and said that there's going to be specific rules and concerning wages that are paid out to business owners and related individuals to the company. So I would anticipate that that there's going to be something, but they're definitely not going to allow a large salary to be counted.
Okay. And can you elaborate a bit more on the 10% wage subsidy and the 75% emergency wage benefit and how they correlated? And so say you max out the 25K max on the 10% subsidy, how does it look against the 75% emergency, which set off? We set off, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So our understanding is basically when you apply for when you will be applying for the 75% wage subsidy, any amount that you've received under the 10% wage subsidy will reduce the amount that you're eligible for. So at a high level, if you max out at $25,000 under the 10% wage subsidy, any amount that you're eligible to receive under the 75% will just be reduced dollar for dollar.
Okay. And a question from Facebook, Chris Chong, one of our great members, asks, a lot of small businesses do not carry that payroll, 50K for 2019 requirement for benefits like the government-backed bank loans. Has there been an announcement for companies like this that would help them with paying for their fixed costs temporarily?
The short answer is haven't seen anything for businesses under 50,000 in payroll.
There's nothing.
Yeah. So there's nothing specifically from a financing perspective that's come up as a COVID response. So you know, like the emergency business account has that stipulation of 50,000 that they've provided, and it's prescriptive specifically as a result of COVID. However, you know, a lot of the banks are offering top-ups on lines of credit and additional existing facilities to business owners that we recommend you have a conversation with your bank, but nothing outside of the emergency business account that's specifically for payroll under 50,000. So nothing similar to that.
Okay. Do we have anything else here? What is, okay, Anita, what is in place for businesses that have payroll over $1 million and just over, they say?
That's where the BCAP programs come in. So because SEBA only applies for 500,000 to $1 million, but over $1 million, you can get into the co-lending programs. That again, you talk to the bank about that, and they'll assess whether you qualify for the co-lending programs between the BDC and the EDC, and these are the ones that go up to 6.25, 6,250,000 each.
Okay. See if there's anything else here. Jenny's question above. Steph, I can't see that. I think it was asked, wasn't it? Nothing up there.
It may have been asked. I don't think so.
Already been answered.
Okay.
Asked and answered.
Awesome.
Anybody else got any other questions? Please put them in there. We are sending our email out with the updates. Probably within the next 5 minutes, as soon as we get off this call. And Todd's asking, so can I confirm I receive a T5 currently? I'm not taking any dividends at this time, so I will qualify for the 2K.
Yes, as long as they were ineligible.
Is that correct? Good. Any last questions from anybody? Please feel free to type them in there. This has been fantastic, folks. Really appreciate all the great information Rise has given us. We will send out your contact information, Steph. Is that right? We've got it posted somewhere, but we'll make sure you can get a hold of Rise. Located in Coquitlam. Been around for a long time and done a lot of good work for us. So any chance we get the slides for reference? Yes, there were some good tables on there, some good slides, especially the timeline slides for everything. Are the presentation's being saved, but can we send the PowerPoint out, Steph? Is that possible? I'm getting a nod of yes, so that's good. We will share with everybody that's been registered is what I've been told. So that's fantastic. And the recording is live, is on Facebook Live on the Chamber site. So you can go back and reference it anytime you want. Really appreciate the information. So that's great. I think we'll close it there, and we'll say just a big thank you to everybody at Rise Advisors for putting this together. It was fantastic. Again, for the Chamber group, for everybody on the call, I'm working hard with CRA and Service Canada for a call next week. When the details have been finalized, they can talk about those, so stay tuned for that. I think tomorrow morning, Angela Calla is doing a webinar on mortgages. So if you got some mortgage issues, you can talk to Angela tomorrow. And we're trying to keep you all connected. So tomorrow afternoon, we're also doing a happy hour, virtual happy hour at 4 o'clock. So be there for that. That's great. That would be fun. At 4 p.m. tomorrow, I'm being told. So that's fantastic. I will be there for a little bit. Then I'm out helping with Share, raise some money for Share and food delivery with Patina Brewery. So we're doing that tomorrow. So there's lots of great stuff going on in the community. Businesses supporting businesses. We're working hard at the Chamber at all levels of government. I can guarantee you that through the BC Chamber, we're getting into where the BC Chamber is every week is talking to the Premier and the Finance Minister directly. We're hearing your concerns. Fill out the surveys that come out, especially the Mind Reader program, because that's what the BC government's looking at right now. The federal government, we sent out an email with a survey that they're doing with Stats Can and the Canadian Chamber. Fill that out because that's going straight to the federal government. Let me know your concerns. We are solely focused on helping you through this crisis we're going through, and I firmly believe we'll come out the other side even better, different, but better, and we're here to help. Thanks to Rise Advisors. You guys were fantastic, and we will see you guys down the road.
Absolutely.
Mike.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thanks.
Bye.